I used to think that being an active member of the church meant that I needed to agree with everything that the church had ever said or done. And I think a little differently about it now. I definitely think a lot about the difference between the gospel and the church. Like the gospel being truth from God and the church being an organization that attempts to put truth from God into action. In last week's video, I talked about this concept of knowing things for sure versus believing things, and how we can't have faith in something if we know it for sure. And I mentioned at the end of that video that I wanted to share with you some things from a talk or a speech that I gave in church once, where I talked about this concept of a testimony being a work in progress. So I'm going to let that notes from that talk kind of guide the discussion today. So I'll be reading several times throughout, but I want to start by talking about what I mean when I say testimony. So a testimony is a conviction, knowledge, or a belief in a truth. And that's how I'm thinking of a testimony, perhaps also as a collection of things that you believe. So here's something that I wrote at the time that I was giving this talk. As I studied the topic, I kept thinking about how it's okay not to feel certitude in your belief, how you can't really have faith if you have a sure knowledge. Faith is such an important part of our religious lives, so it's clear to me that we're not expected to have a certain knowledge of things. In many cases, we're meant to rely on hope and faith. Gaining a testimony is not a simple task, and in my opinion, it's not something you can just check off a list as complete. It takes a lot of time and effort, and a testimony continues to grow, change, and evolve as we go through life. We need to spend time and effort studying, pondering, applying, and praying about what we learn. If you haven't already run into some bumps in the road and difficult challenges on your testimony journey, you're pretty likely to. I'm assuming that regardless of what religion you belong to or whether you even belong to a religion, you've had that experience where you've had some bumps along the road in your testimony journey as you build this collection of beliefs that you hold. Questions about whether something is true or real, concerns, doubts, whatever you want to call it. And that leads me to this question that I've thought about a lot in my lifetime of what do you do with those? What do you stay with this church organization that you're a part of when you're not sure you agree with everything that they've said? Or do you leave? Do you get out of it and go another way? Now I'm going to refer back to this talk that I gave and some of the things that I said here. So what should you do if you're still in the process of finding out for yourself what you believe the right thing is to do? Or if you've hit one of those bumps in the road or have a question you haven't found an answer to? Now I'm going to quote someone, and I just want to explain that in our religion, we have a quorum of 12 apostles, and we refer to those people as elder, so elder, whatever their name is. And in this case, I'm going to refer a couple times to different members of the Quorum of 12 or apostles. And so when you hear me refer to someone as elder someone, I'm quoting from something that they've said. So what should you do if you're still in the process of finding out for yourself what you believe the right thing is to do, or if you've hit one of those bumps in the road or have a question you haven't found an answer to? Elder Ballard compares life to hikers climbing a steep and difficult trail, saying,
"Life can be like hikers ascending a steep and arduous trail. It is a natural and normal thing to occasionally stop on the path to catch our breath, to recalculate our bearings, and to reconsider our pace. Not everyone needs to pause on the path, but there is nothing wrong with doing so when your circumstances require. In fact, it can be a positive thing for those who take full advantage of the opportunity to refresh themselves with the living water of the gospel of Christ. The danger comes when someone chooses to wander away from the path that leads to the tree of life. Sometimes we can learn and study and know, and sometimes we have to believe, trust, and hope."
And I just want to read that last line again because it so closely relates to what I've been thinking and talking about in this video and my previous video. Sometimes we can learn, study, and know. And sometimes we have to believe, trust, and hope. Man, I wish we could always learn, study, and know, but unfortunately, it's not always the case. And so, how do we handle this when we have to go to the side of believing, trusting, and hoping? All right, here's what I wrote in the talk. I like the example we find in the story in John chapter 6, where we read about how some of Jesus' disciples found some of his teachings and doctrine difficult to accept. Some of his disciples decide not to follow him anymore since they're not sure about all of his teachings. Verse 66 says, "From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him." But this isn't the reaction of all of his followers. If you go to verse 67, Jesus turns to the 12 apostles and he asks, "Will ye also go away?" And Peter says, "Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life." So Peter and the other apostles were also finding some of the things that Jesus was teaching difficult to accept, but they didn't leave. They decided to stay with him. And in reference to this story, Elder M. Russell Ballard said, "In that moment, when others focused on what they could not accept, the apostles chose to focus on what they did believe and know, and as a result, they remained with Christ. Today is no different. For some, Christ's invitation to believe and remain continues to be hard or difficult to accept. Some disciples struggle to understand a specific teaching. Others find concerns in history or in the imperfections of some members and leaders, past and present. For these and other reasons, some wonder if perhaps they should follow those who went back and walked no more with Jesus." And Elder Ballard goes on to say, "If you live as long as I have, you will come to know that things have a way of resolving themselves. An inspired insight or revelation may shed new light on an issue." While you're studying, like Elder Ballard encourages in that quote, remember that just because you don't understand something fully yet doesn't mean you won't eventually. I like Elder Neil A. Maxwell's counsel where he says, "We should not assume that just because something is unexplainable by us, it is unexplainable." So that's kind of where I land. This idea of just because something is unexplainable by me doesn't mean it's unexplainable. And so that's when I have to decide what I believe based on what I know and understand in this moment and build my testimony or collection of beliefs that way, and know that also that it's going to be a work in progress. It's going to shift and change and grow over time, and I'm okay with that. And I just keep going, trying to understand, even though I don't understand everything. So now I'm going to go back to my talk and read another section. "I've always liked the comparison of exercising faith to planting a seed." And this is a story from my life. When we moved a couple of years ago, we were excited to find a house to rent that has a large yard in the country. We didn't have a lot of experience with gardening, but we were excited to give it a try. We planted a bunch of different types of seeds in the spring and waited excitedly for the plants to emerge from the ground. Some of the plants sprouted before others, and some grew better than others. We didn't really know what to expect from the seeds since we were new gardeners, and sometimes it was frustrating when seeds or plants didn't behave the way we thought they should. But we didn't give up on the whole garden just because some of the seeds hadn't sprouted yet. We stayed committed to nurturing the plants that were growing and kept watering the garden in the area where things hadn't sprouted yet. If we gave up on the whole garden and stopped weeding and watering it because of the seeds that were late sprouting, we would have missed out on the whole harvest. Some of the things we planted that first year never thrived, but we tried again the following summer with more success and some failure, and we learned a lot. Next season, we'll begin again with our newly gained knowledge and hope to have more success and learn more about some of the seeds we haven't had a lot of success with so far. Let's revisit part of Elder Uchtdorf's quote now. "Just like we would have missed out on a lot of harvest if we gave up on the whole garden when we doubted the good outcome of some of it, quote, we must never allow doubt to hold us prisoner and keep us from the divine love, peace, and gifts that come through faith in the Lord Jesus Christ." Staying on the topic of seeds for a little longer, I can still remember a youth activity that I went to when I was a teenager where we talked about Alma chapter 32 in the Book of Mormon and this concept of experimenting upon the word. In that chapter, it says that if you give place that a seed may be planted in your heart, Behold, if it be a true seed or a good seed, and if you do not cast it out by your unbelief, it will swell and enlarge your soul and enlighten your understanding. The scriptures go on to say that this will increase your faith, but it won't give you a perfect knowledge. The seed goes on to grow and sprout, which again strengthens your faith, and you can see that it's a good seed. And Alma says planting the seed is an experiment. You need to nourish the seed and wait for it to grow to find out if it's a good seed. So it's totally normal to not know everything or to not know things for sure. And it's totally normal to have questions or be waiting for clarity on something. Once the seed grows, you can see its fruit. But if you neglect the plant, it can die. Not because the seed was bad, but because it wasn't nourished. So I like this comparison because it shows us that patience and diligence are needed when it comes to our faith and our testimonies. Sometimes it's like an experiment. We study, we learn, we follow commandments, and we put in the effort and we practice patience and faith as we wait to see the fruits. Verse 42 and 43 say, "And because of your diligence and your faith and your patience with the word in nourishing it, that it may take root in you, behold, by and by ye shall pluck the fruit thereof, which is most precious, which is sweet above all that is sweet, and which is white above all that is white. Yea, and pure above all that is pure, and ye shall feast upon this fruit, even until ye are filled, that ye hunger not, neither shall ye thirst. Then, my brethren, ye shall reap the rewards of your faith and your diligence, and patience and long-suffering, waiting for the tree to bring forth fruit unto you." And I find this encouraging because it's really easy for me to get frustrated when I don't understand something fully right away. All right, I want to finish up by reading this last section of my talk. I wrote, "I want to live with integrity, doing what I believe is right, based on what I believe to be true. But it's difficult when I find myself questioning whether I'm on the right track, or when I have an unanswered question that leaves me unsure about the specifics of my beliefs. The scriptures and quotes from prophets and apostles that I've shared in my talk today give me comfort to know that I'm not alone in having an incomplete knowledge of the gospel or a testimony that's a continual work in progress. Questions, doubts, and confusion are to be expected along the way, and persistent studying, pondering, prayer, and patient waiting are necessary parts of the process. Just like Jesus' apostles stayed with him even though they found some things difficult to understand or accept, we too can focus on what we do know to be true, the seeds we've planted that have already shown good fruit, and stay committed on our testimony journeys. Not that we need to ignore the questions or doubts that come up, but that we keep working with faith to gain clarity and understanding over time as we build our testimonies throughout our lives." I've come to see that a testimony isn't something that you decide on and it stays the same forever. It's something that's going to grow and shift over time. I have found peace in defining what I believe based on what feels right and true to me, and letting that be something that will evolve over time. There are still things that I don't fully understand, but just like Peter said, "Lord, to whom shall we go?" This is a place where I have found peace and understanding and truths that have been good for me in my life. And so it's a place where I'm choosing to stay and continue to seek knowledge and understanding and growth. So do I agree with everything that my church organization has ever said or done? No. And I don't think that's what faith is. I think it's staying open and seeking and trusting that God will guide me along my path to building my own testimony. And I think that the same can be true for you, regardless of what church organization you belong to or whether you belong to one. I think we have to be patient with ourselves and give ourselves time and be okay with not knowing, because I think that's why faith is important. We're not expected to know everything in this life. We have to walk by faith.